Okay, so we're looking at building our parent toolkit or helping those who are parents, because a lot of times anyone who is a parent or has been a child and have had parents, we know that nothing goes the way that we think it's going to ever. So this is the art of imperfect parenting, because there's no such thing as a perfect parent. And I'll skip through this part because I think by now most know who I am and what we're doing. So a parent's love is whole no matter how many times it is divided. And this could be with one child. We oftentimes will see this when we have multiple children, and it gets very hard to balance attention between children. But no matter what is going on, we know that love is whole as long as there's attempts being made to have that with your child. So throughout time, if we think of the perfect family, the idea of what the perfect family is has changed, and it will continue to change well after we're gone. So if we think back several decades ago, we have like the Leave It to Beaver. This was perfect family on television. Now, if we have people going back and watching Leave It to Beaver who have never heard of it, because it's unreal to think that people don't know what Leave It to Beaver is, but they don't. Going back and looking at this may not seem like the perfect family to people who go back and watch it today. Little newer, we look at something like Full House. And then in today's society, a lot of kids are being brought up something like the Kardashians. That's what we're seeing on TV. So again, this idea of the perfect family, one, it doesn't exist, and the facade of the perfect family has changed drastically over the decades as far as what that actually means. So we're going to talk about some tips and tricks and just kind of number them as we go through. But number one, delight in moments of connection, however small they may be, because we know in today's world, even with one child, we are busy and going, and sometimes it's hard to find those moments that we consider to be those moments and really connect. So one thing we want to look at is quality versus quantity, because again, quantity, we may not have a lot of them, at least not what in our mind we allow us to think this is it, this is quality time. How many opportunities do we have? So which is more important? Is it quality? Is it quantity? We can have a lot of time with our children, but if it's not quality time, is it really doing what we want it to do? We can have very few things, but if it's big impact, is it accomplishing more than what it might be if we were having many of those smaller moments? And the biggest thing is, how do we balance that? How do we keep up with the Joneses? And in today's world, again, perfect family has changed, but more specifically, everyone has social media. And I'm guilty of this sometimes. I have brag posts just because I'm like, you know what? I paid a lot of money to go to Disney World. Heck yeah, I'm going to post some pictures of us at Disney World because, you know, I paid thousands of dollars to do this. We know that not everyone's going to Disney World. We also know that just because there's these really, really great pictures on Instagram doesn't mean that that's what's actually happening in that picture. But it's very easy for us to get caught up in that and judge our worth as a parent based on what others are doing. The biggest thing is to remember is Instagram is not real. Facebook is not real. People are putting those posts out there because we do it. Everyone does it. So making sure we're not judging our worth based on what someone else is doing, because it really is not relevant. In our brain it is, but in all honesty, it's not relevant. We want to toolkit tips for number one, be spontaneous. We don't have to plan out the things that we're doing with our children. Some of my favorite memories with my parents, I can remember, are just on the fly. Let's go to the park. Let's go get something to eat. Let's go. Very spontaneous things. Some things that are just right in the home. If we have games that we play. My son, examples I'll use, he is 6. So right now he's at that really fun, you know, first grade age where everything is cool and we can make everything awesome, which is great. He'll start losing that very soon. I realize that. But right now, you know, we're spontaneous. We have game nights every once in a while. If he asks, and we might be really stressed out from work, but if we're really not doing anything, it doesn't hurt to play a game. It takes 10 minutes and we're done. He's lost interest. He's going on to the next thing. If we are working from home online or with Zoom and we have a child that's there and we're also watching our kids, that's happening so much today. During breaks, have a tickle fight, have whatever it might be that is spontaneous so that they are getting our attention, even if it's not quantity, but it's that quality time that we can spend wherever we can. Use a healthy love language. Everyone has a different love language. Some things are more healthy than others. Also, some things are more healthy in certain quantity than others. So one love language would be feeling, touch. If you are walking in the store and your child wants to hold your hand, that doesn't seem like a lot, but it's huge to your child, depending on their age. We also know that some people respond well, and think of your love language, what you respond to well with a partner or with a family member. A lot of people respond well to gifts, but we know that if we're constantly buying our child gifts, that may not be giving the attention that we want. So we want a healthy love language, whatever that love language is that we establish. We want to be present. That doesn't always mean physically present, because we know some parents are going to be busier than others. If you're the term breadwinner for the family and you have a lot of evening meetings, if you're not able to go to all the events with the rest of the family, that is very hard for a parent to be able to accept that. But when you are present, be present. Put the cell phone away. Mentally be present. Have conversations with your child. Create special time. This is really important, especially if you have more than one child. Maybe one of your children have a specific hobby that they really like doing. Maybe your family plans something around an interest of one of the children. Maybe you and or your spouse, maybe you have times where you'll just take one child and go do something that they're really interested in. That way they get that attention. It's a little bit different than what the other kids are getting. And this again could just be time for one child. If you only have one, creating special time that's just for them. Again, I have a 6-year-old. He will request no phones days. He's 6. He knows that mom and dad have to check email for work. He knows that there are times where we are on our phone more than we maybe know that we are on our phone. So his special time is no phones days. If we have a Saturday, he'll say, can we have a no phones day today? And we're like, yeah, phones off. We leave them on the chargers all day and we go and we do, and we're mentally present for him. Make it a game. Everything can be a game, especially when they're younger. Doesn't matter what it is. Pick up the toys, it can be a game. Wash our hands, it can be a game. If we can make it fun, so it's not as daunting of a task, because obviously everything can't be fun, but if we can make a game or sing a song with it, it helps. Use what you have. It doesn't take a lot of money. A little bit of creativity, you would be surprised what you can do with very little. And we'll talk about some of those things toward the end. And then plan ahead for the big things. But we want to be realistic with our expectations. So an example of this would be, we're planning to go to Disney World. If you're planning to go to Disney World and in planning, you're not having realistic expectations, be prepared to be very disappointed after spending thousands of dollars on that trip, because we have to have realistic expectations. We know that our kids are going to have a meltdown. We know that as a parent, we're going to get hot and tired, and we're going to get tired of carrying things and being, okay, let's go, let's go. We're going to get frustrated with people around us that we can't control. So we want to plan ahead, but we also have to know that, okay, something is going to go wrong, but we have to be able to adapt to it. Recognize and celebrate strengths. So when we look at our child, we want to see a person, and not just a person, but we want to see a whole person. They are not us. They are not your other child. They are not their sibling. They may not fit into yours or society's norms. Don't force them to. They don't, especially when they're little. We know that with societal norms, as they get older, we're going to want them to fit in. But the truth is, some children, I mean, we've heard the expression, why fit in when you're born to stand out? There are going to be little quirks around the way that, I mean, everyone is their own person. Don't try to shape them into something that they're not. Small things to us are huge for them. Celebrate them. Make a big deal out of something small. Doesn't matter what it is. They learn to tie their shoe. To us, it's like, oh, thank God, we don't have to buy Velcro anymore. I don't have to spend 20 minutes every morning getting this kid's shoes on. But to them, this is, I mean, we celebrate. That's huge. Don't dismiss things. Oh, yeah, it's okay. Let's go. If it's something that is out of the ordinary for them, make sure you're paying attention to it, because again, what seems small to us is probably not going to be small to them. Their strengths may not be your strengths. If they have an interest, take an interest in it. Doesn't mean it's going to be your thing. Again, 6-year-old, he is getting very into Minecraft right now because that's what's popular with all the little boys and girls. I know nothing about Minecraft. We try to play together. I am not very good at it. It has been a very long time since I have played video games, but he is really interested, and he could talk 20, 30 minutes about the different types of metal and wood that it takes to build these weapons and make these characters. I have no idea what he's talking about, but we have started reading Minecraft books together, and I will let him mouth vomit for many minutes to me, and I listen, and there are certain terms that I'm starting to pick up on, and I can start to have little conversations with him. We also want to focus on the positives. It's so easy to focus on the negatives, especially when we've had a really hard day, when we're really down. It's very easy unknowingly to bring them down with us. So we want to focus on positives. Yeah, you spilled the milk all over the kitchen floor, but look how much you got in your glass. That's an increased thing. Again, more than likely that's going to be with a small child, but even as they become middle schoolers, teenagers, focusing on the positives are, okay, you went to a party last night. You were told not to, but something went wrong and you called me. You knew that something wasn't right. We did that. Does that mean they're still not getting punished? No, they're probably going to be grounded until they graduate, but we want to focus on those positives as well so that we can kind of highlight what they're doing well. Focus on their interests. We kind of already said that. Be prepared for their interests to change at the drop of a hat. Warren, my son, he's really into Minecraft today. It could be something completely different tomorrow, and that's okay. That's also have realistic expectations. If he's really into Minecraft, I'm not going to go out and spend hundreds of dollars on Minecraft stuff because, again, he's 6. I know that interest is going to change. That doesn't mean we don't play into that interest, but I also set realistic expectations. He is currently taking piano lessons at his request. He wanted to learn how to play piano. I'm not going out and buying a piano yet. We got a hand-me-down keyboard for free on Facebook Marketplace, and that's what we're using. If he decides he gets really into it, then maybe we'll look at a piano, but we have to have those realistic expectations. Encourage them to nurture their passion. What do they want to do? What do they like doing? Allow them to do that. Again, it may not be our interest. It may be something where we have to read up on a little bit to figure out what they're talking about. Skip labeling or try to mix labels up. Our son, and this every child, he about a year ago started really having a hard time about him being a boy, because a lot of boys, I think the pandemic played into this, but a lot of little boys his age like to get dirty. They like to get messy. They like to play with trucks in the dirt. That is not our kid. If he gets dirt on him, he is freaking out. That could be cooking in the kitchen. That could be, he just does not play in dirt. So instead of labeling things as a boy activity or a boy toy or a girly activity or a girl toy, my husband and I had to change the way we talked about things, because he does not like a lot of the things. He doesn't like being rough. He doesn't like he is just a very chill, stand back and watch kind of kid. He also, one of his favorite colors is purple. And that was very hard because the little boys at school made fun of him for saying his favorite color was purple. His favorite color was purple because he really liked Barney, and Barney was purple. And once we figured out reasoning behind, we're like, okay, all of this makes sense. But purple is considered a girl color. So watch labeling, they pick up on all of that. Praise the process, not the outcome. Again, are they learning to fill their own cup from the refrigerator spout? Something that seems very easy to us. They drop the cup, it goes everywhere. It's very easy to on the fly have that freak out moment and kind of lose our cool for a second. But they are learning. They did it correctly. They took the lid off. They had the lid ready to put it back on. Maybe we need to do the positives. Next time we'll use 2 hands to hold the cup rather than one. Maybe use a different cup, maybe one that's smaller or bigger. So praise the process, not necessarily what goes wrong along the way. Make mistakes teachable moments. Those kind of build on each other. Focus on the positives, even if there aren't very many. If you have children, you know that there are things where you're really struggling to find a positive that happened, but we really do want to struggle a positive, or have them tell you a positive. Because again, a lot of things that are happening with them, we're not realizing. We're adults. It has been a very long time since we were at that child's age. Again, even as a teenager. And if we have them, what's one thing you learned? What's one positive? What's one thing that happened today that you liked? They're going to tell us something. And a lot of times we're surprised by it because we don't think the way that they do. If you use the 1-1-1 rule, so one thing you did well, one thing you learned, and one thing that you can improve on, or one thing you would do differently. We've got 3 talking points. They identify 3 things. And again, we're probably going to learn just as much from that as what they did. We want to ask questions. So when children are little, they ask over 200 questions a day. I forget what the actual average is, but it is a crazy number. So us asking questions rather than going into that, okay, work's over, I picked them up from school, we're automatically going into that, we've all been there, we're tired. Every adult has that. But ask some open-ended questions. Then what happened? What do you think that means? What did they do next? All of that is going to hopefully help us get to higher order thinking, which will be on the next slide. And by the way, that's what their teachers are trying to get them to do at school too. So you're incorporating things and asking questions in a way that their teachers are probably doing at school too. And this is one thing we have already started noticing. When you pick up your child from school and you go, how was your day? It was okay. Warren, his is, I had pizza for lunch. That's the highlight of his day. Every day is what was for lunch. But if we can start asking more direct questions, then they start getting into talking, because to them, they don't know what you want to hear. They're telling you what their coolest thing was and they're done. Have them think out their own actions and consequences. So why are you in trouble? Why are you getting grounded? What happened? What could we have done differently? What happens when you do that? Just kind of talking them through the process, which is really big for them understanding punishments as well, which we'll talk about. It is hard to explain important things if they don't have practice in knowing what those important things are. So the more you talk about it, the more it's going to be commonplace and the more they're going to start understanding. This is a slide. Again, this is what all of their teachers are using. Anyone who works with children probably has heard of Bloom's taxonomy. And when we look at this, there are key words. And if you've ever looked at your child's curriculum standards for school, they're going to use these exact words. Remember, understand, apply, analyze, evaluate, create. And then this also gives you other words that tied to that. So identifying, naming, counting, repeating, recalling. Those remember are like your kindergarten, preschool level things. They're learning to count to 10. They're learning to count to 100. They're learning their ABCs. Then we're getting to understanding. They're able to describe, to talk about at a higher level, to explain something, to make their own summaries of what's happening. Apply. Can they explain why something's happening? And they may not be correct in explaining, but they're starting to understand the process of explaining cause and effect. Analyzing, evaluating, creating. Some of this starts at a fairly young age, but this hopefully will continue to get more and more as they age as well. Whenever your child gets really upset, have them try to explain why. And don't be surprised when you say, why are you mad? They're not going to say anything, because a lot of times they don't know why they're mad. Even when we're getting to first, second grade, they do not do well at recognizing their own emotions. They just know that's how they feel. So if we give them some options, are you feeling mad? Are you feeling sad? Are you feeling upset? Once we identify the emotions, then it's easier for them to tell us why they're feeling that way. Ask for them to work on cause and effect. Toys and books are great for this. So especially with books, before we turn the page, what do you think is going to happen on the next page? What do you think is going to happen? Because again, I have a 6-year-old boy. What do you think is going to happen when Captain Underpants does that? So before you turn a page, have them try to guess. Ask questions about parts and not just the whole. This could be very early. So parts that are happening in a story. So did you like that book? What was your favorite part? What did you think was funny? What did you think was scary? What did you think? So kind of separating, especially when it deals with emotions. Be prepared for them to not know an answer, and that's okay. They don't have to know an answer. We can try to get them to get an answer, but it's not because they're not wanting to answer you or they're wanting to be, a problem. A lot of times they don't know the answer or they don't know what you want them to answer, so they're quiet. Have them reflect on whys, especially when it's a punishment or consequence. So why did we have to turn the TV off? What happened? What do you think your punishment should be? What do you think, mom or dad should do because you did that? Sometimes that's a great way to have them have a punishment, because they will give you a worse punishment than what you would give them in the first place, because they feel really guilty about what they did. Also, don't ask too many questions. Granted, they will ask us a million, but we can also overstimulate them, and then they tend to shut down and they don't want to talk to us anymore. They've been being asked questions all day long at school. When they come home, it's kind of like us at work. When we've had to make a million decisions at work, we come home and we are just done and we want to zone out. Kids have that same need. Most importantly, always encourage them to ask questions and answer them as honestly as possible. Does that mean you can't say the playground closes at 6 o'clock? Nope, because we've all told those kind of lies. But do know they eventually figure those things out. So encourage them to ask questions. If you have a discussion, always end with, do you have any questions? It's kind of like an interview. Do you have any questions for me? Because a lot of times they do, but they're too shy or they're too scared to ask. So making sure that they know that there's always open communication and they can also ask questions is really, really big. We talked about this one. We have already talked about our self-help with our self-care in our first session of this series. So we have to make sure we're taking care of ourselves to be a good parent. If not, we're going to have freak out moments because we are going to be stressing out. If we can't care for ourselves, we are not going to be able to care for our children. Also, hopefully this helps you feel a little more normal. 1 in 5 parents admit that their stress levels ruin the holiday for their child. Again, those reasonable expectations. Parents, I am guilty of this one at Christmas time. I try to get the coolest presents, not necessarily spending a lot of money, but I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to see his face when he opens this present. And then they open it and they're like, and they throw it to the side. It hurts your feelings when something like that happens, but they are not doing that on purpose. Okay, could you talk to them about that? Like, well, why didn't you like that? Or you said you wanted that a month ago. I thought you'd be so excited for it. But we don't want to ruin their experience with it because our feelings got hurt. We would get mad at them for doing the exact same thing. So we also need to be mindful of that ourselves. 1 in 5 children report that, or parents of children report that they worry a lot or a great deal, while only 3% of parents say their children they worry about their children is higher than a 7 out of 10. So they worry a lot or a great deal, 3%, and 7 that they worry on a scale, 7 out of 10 or more about their children. So everyone with a child worries about their child. It happens. We're all worried, some more than others. Children from birth to 5 are considered to be the most fragile when it comes to their brain development. And I want you to think from birth to 5, how many of those oh crap moments where you have snapped because of their safety, because they almost touched something that was hot, because they almost fell off the edge of something, because they almost fell into the swimming pool, because they're not cognitively aware, or their spatial awareness is not fully developed. We have so many of those moments. So helping to kind of teach ourselves how to react before we react really helps in their development too, because if not, we have children who are overly cautious, or they're those crazy risk takers because temperament does not reflect their parents' temperament. Okay, I sent out a parenting style assessment, which shouldn't take too long, but just kind of looking at what your parenting style says. And if you look at parenting styles, we also normally have our neglectful parent, but that kind of brings us into another topic. So we're really these three, authoritative, authoritarian, or permissive. Authoritative is what most parents strive to do. This is normally what is regarded as the best parenting style. However, in striving to have this type of parenting, we also have a lot of parents who strive for this and actually become permissive parenting because they're so afraid that they are going to harm the development of their child. You're going to harm the development of their child. So a lot of parents strive for this, but they become permissive. We also have a lot of parents that know that this is the best parenting style. However, they go with their authoritarian. It rules out in the end, where we are the because I said so. We don't really give reasons. This is what we think should be happening. And the child doesn't always understand why that is. And that's very important that we're explaining it. So it's also often described as kind of being an overbearing parent, not necessarily a helicopter parent, but overbearing. We definitely tend to respond before we think. The permissive style, we probably all know a parent or a child with a parent like this, where they want to be friends with their child. They're not really giving restrictions. They're not really giving structure because they don't want to upset their child. They want them to be happy. We all do. But we do still have to have structure because they're not going to really flourish without that. If nothing else, this number 6 is a huge one to just kind of listen to. And I can tell you that my parents were not always the best with this. And that's probably why I focus so much on it, because I know my parents were not very good at this. And they were also very different between punishment for me and for my younger brother. Does the punishment fit the crime? What works for one does not work for all. So what worked for your oldest child probably will not work for your middle child, probably will not work for your youngest. We also know there's a whole lot that we could talk about with birth order. We're not going to talk about that today. I could send you a ton of information on it. But if you have more than one child, you probably know that the first one is normally better behaved than the second, the third, the fourth, and so on. Middle children have certain character behaviors that are normally associated with them. And a lot of times it's right. Granted, temperaments can vary. But due to birth order, we know that what works for one does not work for all. My parents telling me you hurt my feelings would make me cry and ball up in the middle of the floor. My parents telling my younger brother that he hurt their feelings, he would laugh out loud in their faces. It's just the difference in children. Don't expect them to be able to do things that you struggle with. The best example for this, timeout. I believe timeout definitely can work. But if you have a 3-year-old and you want them to sit for 10 minutes, their attention span is about 1 minute for every age the child is old. So maximum 3 minutes. If you're wanting them to sit for 10 minutes, it's not because they're not wanting to listen to you. They are mentally not at an age where they can sit for 10 minutes. It's not going to happen. So if you have trouble sitting still for, say you're 30 years old, if you have trouble sitting for 30 minutes, are they going to be, you just kind of have to understand that if you can't do it, they can't do it. Why do you have these rules and expectations? Because guaranteed your child at some point is going to say, why? Why is that the rule? I don't understand. Sometimes it's logical consequences. We know that if they touch the hot stove, they're going to get burnt, and we can explain that to them. They may not understand that until they burn their finger, but we can explain that it's hot, you're going to get hurt. Other rules and expectations are harder to explain, especially when it's because it embarrasses your mom and dad. We don't act that way in public. Why? You let me act that way at home. I'm allowed to do those things when no one else is around. So how can you expect them to act differently when they're out in public? We also know that there's different types of consequences. So we have logical, it makes sense. We have natural, they lose their jacket, they're going to be cold. And then we also have problem solving. So what do you think the punishment should be? What do you think the consequence should be? Talk it through with them, problem solve, and figure out what makes sense. So here we have some examples. We've got 4 of these. Number 1, Jack has a habit of leaving his jacket on the school bus. He has left his good coat on the bus and it is now nowhere to be found. He has also left several lighter zip-up jackets as well. Jack is a 6-year-old in kindergarten. He comes home tonight without any jacket and he has no jackets to wear tomorrow when he gets on the bus. What should Jack's consequence be? And what would you do as a parent? So Kristen, what do you think? Since you're my person on here, what do you think his consequence should be?
This is actually something that I struggle with my 10-year-old.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes.
He literally does this all the time. And so usually unfortunately, I always have another one. And I tell him, please, when you go to school, try to find the jacket that you lost or that you left behind. And most of the time I think I remember where I left it. And it's probably not there. So it was probably taken to the office. So you'll have to go to the office and then we never get it back. We never find it because by the time he gets to school, he completely forgets about it.
Yep.
And then when he comes home, it's, Mom, I forgot to ask. Or then he'll say, I just couldn't find it where I left it. And so we kind of I'm still trying to figure that out. Still trying. This is like the perfect example for me because I have no.
Yes. So, and it's a great one because we know that, and especially he's 6, right? So how, in this situation, yours is 10. So sometimes it takes them a while, but they're not losing their jacket on purpose.
Right?
I don't think so, unless it's one they just really don't like that you bought for them. But otherwise, I don't think they're going to lose it on purpose. And the jacket is hard because if it's something like gloves or mittens, sometimes we can almost attach them to the jacket so they're not able to fall out, or we practice putting them in a pocket, or we do something. But a jacket's the whole thing. So what do we do with a jacket? Could it be something where we problem solve of, okay, when we're going to take it out or take it off, if you can't remember what to do with it, then you need to tie it around your waist. You need to tie it around your neck and look like one of those frat boys from back in the day.
Right.
Maybe it's something like that, which that's still, especially at 10, doesn't mean they're going to listen. Could it be as they start getting a little bit older, as long as it's not like middle of winter in a blizzard? Obviously, we don't want to send them out without a jacket with that. But if it's getting a little cooler, let them go. I will tell you, because in today's age, you may let their teacher know why you're sending them to school with no coat on.
Yes.
But if they see that, oh my gosh, it's cold, I really need a coat, then that might be enough at 10 to make him say, oh, yeah, okay, I see why mom's upset. I need to find my coat. It also may point them to where it amazes me, and especially in elementary school or middle school, how many students do not know where the lost and found is in their school.
Yeah. I tell him to go to the office and then the office will direct him to where to go if it's not there in the office, because there has been times where it's changed throughout the year. So this year he's in the middle school. He's enjoying the middle school. He tells me how much he loves it all the time and how much it's so much more freedom there. And we don't have to walk in strict lines. And so he's really enjoying that. And we actually, literally last week just went through this where he had a sweatshirt that he wore to school and he took it off. So my thought at the time was to here's what I said. I said, you have to go back and see if you can find that sweatshirt. Okay. Because we can't just keep throwing them away or losing them. It's not, we can't replace them all the time. So you have to keep track of your things. So when you go to school, look for them. And I said, if you get hot and you want to take your sweatshirt off, that's okay. Stick it in your book bag. You have a
Yes.
locker, stick it in your locker. And then that way, when you're ready to come home, you have it with you or you see it before you leave your locker.
Yes.
And his response to me was, which is where it gets complicated for me, was that he is only allowed access to his locker in the morning and at the end of the day. So
Yep.
if he gets hot in the middle of the day, because in the morning it's still cold. So in the middle of the day, he gets hot and he takes it off and he hangs it over his shirt or his chair, or he leaves it on the side of the floor in the gym. That's where he usually loses it. And
Yep,
so
and it's there.
that's where I'm stuck. Right.
Yep.
Because I'm like, well, I get that because I could probably do that too.
Yep. If it's where he has his chair, a suggestion would be, and you could practice this at home with him a couple times and he's gonna be like, oh, mom. But
Yeah.
instead of like laying it over his chair, if he takes it and puts it on like the chair as a person and puts
Right.
the sweatshirt over it, it doesn't fall off the chair. Because as soon as it's out of sight, it's out of mind.
Yep.
At 10, he's done. If he's playing in gym and he left it on the sidelines, if their teacher's not saying, okay, I used to be a teacher. So even if the teacher does go, okay, I have an orange sweatshirt, if he's not paying attention at the time, he's not going to get it. And
Right.
gym teachers, I'm sure, probably have the biggest collection of clothing at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So there's that natural consequence that could come. There also could be if it's clothing and he starts understanding, and he's getting closer to the age where this might work with him. If clothes cost money, especially if it's, nice hoodies or jackets or whatever it is. My niece and nephew, they were really bad with hoodies. They had a lot of Under Armour hoodies and they kept leaving them at school. Well, they didn't get them back because they never went to get them back. And by the time their parents went with them, they were gone and who knows where they went.
Right.
So instead, they were given so much money. And normally it was not, I'm talking like $5, maybe 10, and they had to go to Goodwill and buy hoodies with their money because they were getting to a point where it was, okay, here's what I have. We don't want to embarrass them. So it's not like, if you can't remember, you're going to have to wear one of my pink hoodies kind of things. Embarrassment doesn't really accomplish what we want with them. But if they start saying that, okay, money ties into this, I normally wouldn't wear and every kid's different, but if it's, I normally wouldn't wear a Mario hoodie and that's all they had at Goodwill. Well, I don't want to be cold either. So here's my option where I really do need to start paying attention. And eventually they start making those habits. But you're right. At that age, there's not always a great answer.
Yeah, he is very quick. He is my third. So he's actually my youngest and he is very quick-witted with the responses as to, well, it's because, and it's, well, this happened. And, so he's very quick with it and it catches me off guard sometimes because I'm like, well, you're 10. Like, I don't understand because my oldest was not like this. And my middle son was not like this.
Is there an age between him and his next oldest sibling?
There is 4 years between him and his brother. And then there is 7 years between him and his oldest sibling, which is his sister.
Okay. So there's getting to be a decent amount of space between them then.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he has a good age gap between each of them. And I think maybe I shouldn't, but I always think like, well, it's because the other two are like teenagers that, that's where he's getting this quick-wittedness from.
And it very well could be. It really could be.
He picks up on it so fast that where I'm like, can you stop please? Because you're supposed to be my baby.
Like you're 10, you're not 18 yet. Chill out.
Right. Yeah. I don't like this.
Yeah. I am so glad we only have one. When I hear some stories, I'm like, oh, I don't know if
Yeah, having one is amazing. And then when I had two, I enjoyed it at first, because then all the other challenges come along to having, the toddler with the baby. Then you have the big kid who is 7 and then the baby's born and you're running to school and you're doing all these different things and you're trying to carry an infant and a toddler on your hip while you're trying to participate. And it became
Right.
very complicated, and it's still that way sometimes. It's
Yeah.
easier now that my younger two are both in middle school, but last year I had a child in every school. So one
Oh,
in elementary,
no.
one in middle, and then one in high school. So every morning it was a stop at 3 schools before I went to work. So
Oh,
it was making it a little bit difficult, but challenges we get over.
yeah. Well, and it just becomes the norm, right?
Yes,
Uh,
yes,
You probably don't even remember when it wasn't that way. So it's
yeah.
amazing what you can just kind of adapt to. All right, here is Io. Io asked his dad to get him some paper to use with his markers because he knows the rule of not using markers without the marker paper, which, by the way, is a great rule if you have little ones, that mom buys. Io is 4 years old and really wants to be an artist. Dad told Io to wait until he finishes his meeting and then he will get them the paper. When Dad comes out of his office, he finds Io writing on his thin notebook paper on the expensive area rug in the middle of the floor, and the markers have soaked all the way through. What should Io's consequence be?
Consequence. I don't think there should be a consequence, I guess. Maybe just I would talk with him
Yeah, so why
and
do we
explain
think Io
why.
did that?
Because of his attention span. He's 4.
Yeah,
He doesn't understand waiting until the meeting is over.
yeah. And he doesn't understand why Dad can't do it. Also, we know that if he's wanting to draw, was there something that Dad could have diverted his attention to? Or was it that Io didn't really have anything to do while Dad was in his meeting? So
Right.
it probably wasn't Io's fault. And he did have paper. He had the paper that was available and probably didn't think anything of the rug. And it's not like he wanted to draw on the rug. So,
Right. Yeah. He was doing the right thing. He just didn't, he's
yeah.
4.
Yeah. But we also have to think, how likely was it that Dad came in and was like, Io?
Yes. Yes, I can understand that.
100% guaranteed. That's exactly what happened. So again, when we think about it, does it fit the crime? Probably not. I mean, maybe Io has to go do another activity before we get the paper out and we get our mindset together before we're like, okay, he can draw now with those markers. But otherwise, it wasn't really Io's fault.
Right. Or how about we draw with the crayons instead, or
there you go.
instead.
Maybe reinforcing that, okay, we didn't have the special marker paper, so could you have gotten your crayons out to draw? Yeah, that's a good one. All right, Jonna's mom brings her pads of paper and other fun things home from work several times a month. Jonna is 8. A lot of the items she brings and gives to Jonna have her mom's business logos written on them. One day, Jonna had to go into the office with her mom, and when they walked by her mom's boss, Jonna thanked him for all the fun things her mom had been bringing home to her. The boss immediately asked Jonna's mom to come to their office to talk about the missing supplies in the supply room. Jonna's mom looks really mad. What do you think Jonna's consequence should be?
Definitely no consequence. That was absolutely on the mother.
Right? But how do you think mom's going to be feeling after that interaction?
Oh, I'm sure she's probably, well, you got me in trouble. We can't talk about things.
Yes.
I can relate to because there has been times where you kind of want to, which I've thought about and I've combated in the past, where I'm like, I have that like self-talk before I have the conversation with them.
Yes.
So it's really not their fault. And I shouldn't be asking them to keep secrets. It was innocent. They were just thanking someone. They were doing the polite thing. They were doing the right thing. And
yeah, really, if we take the other context out of this, it was really sweet that Jonna was thanking the boss.
Right. Yeah.
For the things that she's been enjoying.
Right. She was being respectful.
Yeah.
Which is what
probably
we want.
doing, hopefully what mom also taught her. But
right.
Bad timing. But we don't want to lose our stuff on Jonna because she really didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
All right, last one. We have Kia. Kia is 7 years old and has a bedroom all to herself. She has a small list of chores that she has to do regularly. These chores include making her bed, picking up her dirty clothes and helping her mom clean up the dirty dishes around the house, especially all those water glasses in her bedroom. Recently, Kia's mom has started asking her to take a bag of dirty clothes downstairs and put them in the washing machine. Kia has left the hamper bag in the doorway of her room for the last 3 days as it sits full. Even after being told 3 times, once each day, she is not taking it downstairs. What should Kia's consequence be?
Ooh. I don't know. This one I would struggle with because maybe she's not why is she not taking it downstairs? Is it because she doesn't know exactly what to do?
That's a great question. So Kia's 7. Is a
Yeah.
7-year-old going to know how to work the washing machine?
Probably not, unless there's assistance,
Right.
you know.
And we are saying in here to take it downstairs and put it in the washing machine. So is she just feeling overwhelmed by the chore that we're asking her to do? Has mom showed her where to actually put the clothes, or is she saying take those downstairs and put them in the washing machine?
Or she could be scared to carry that basket downstairs. Maybe she's scared of falling.
Yes.
Or it's too heavy.
The basket themselves, or she's 7, my son's 6. Right now, we are also going through the stage of, I don't want to go downstairs by myself. It's dark down there.
Right. Yeah.
So what actually is it? So maybe that's let's talk about it. Is it she's just not doing it because she doesn't want to do it? Well, then maybe we talk about that. But otherwise, there's probably something going on that Kia might have a reason why she's not doing that.
Right.
All right. Again, why do we have this rule? Make sure it actually makes sense to you before you give them the reasoning, because if it doesn't make sense to you, there's no way it's going to make sense to them. Make sure you explain your reasoning in ways they understand. Make comparisons. I love if you have a child that watches, especially when they're little and you're starting to do this, if they watch Bluey or Arthur or whatever TV show it might be or book you have read that had a similar situations. Do you remember when we read the Berenstain Bears book and they did this? Comparing so that they understand. Also,
Right.
Make sure your punishment or your consequence fits the crime, because if they don't have a relation to one another, they're probably going to resent you for their punishment. Also, try not to focus on the punishment rather than positive and negative reinforcement, especially healthy, positive punishment. And that's what we're going to look at here for a couple seconds, how to properly discipline, not punish, but discipline. I'm going to skip the video and we're just going to kind of talk about this because we'll go way over with the video. Whenever we are looking at consequences, we want to look at reinforcement. So we have positive reinforcement, we have negative reinforcement, and we have positive punishment. We also have negative punishment, but we don't really want to do that. So positive reinforcement, we are adding or reinforcing a behavior that makes it more likely that a behavior will occur again in the future. And the video I was going to play is from the show Big Bang Theory. There is a scene where Sheldon Cooper gives Penny, one of the other characters, a chocolate every time she does a behavior that Sheldon actually likes. And you can search that and find it on YouTube. It's pretty cute. But if we are looking at positive reinforcement, we also have very extreme examples of positive reinforcement. So let's talk about an allowance. There are a lot of people who give allowances to their children, but a lot of times an allowance, if not done correctly, kind of installs some behaviors and some mindsets as they get older that we don't really want to instill in our children. So can we give them an allowance? Yes. Every time they do their chores, they get a quarter, or they get $5 at the end of the week, as long as they do all the chores on their chore chart. That's fine. The problem is with positive reinforcement, we want to make the behavior continue even if we're not constantly giving that reward. So something like a high five or a fist bump or positive encouragement can do as much as allowance can. Granted, if you don't start the positive reinforcement until they're getting older, then a high five or a fist bump is not going to mean as much. Because if you have a 12-year-old and you're like, yeah, man, most of them are going to be like, okay, mom, I'd
Yep.
rather have $1.
Mine would look at me like I had 3 heads.
Yeah. Yeah.
What is wrong with you?
Yes. Once they get to a certain point, if we don't start young, then it's harder, still not impossible, but it does become harder because we have to meet their needs with what we're reinforcing with, and their needs change. And it could be something like positive reinforcement. If you get your chore chart done this week, maybe it's not money, but maybe it's, we'll go to the park, or you can go to the school dance, or you can go to whatever it might be that they're looking forward to. They're doing correct behaviors, so you're giving them something that they want. So maybe it's a thing or an event that you're rewarding them with. Our negative reinforcement is the removal of something positive that they like. Most people have been grounded. The majority of the time, grounding works if you start when they are younger. You're taking away something that they enjoy. Again, if you don't start using grounding until they start getting older, then they just might start hating you as a parent. It's like, oh, they took my phone. This is ridiculous. Now I'm going to sneak around and use my friend's phone. And it's so much easier to get around grounding now with technology. So sometimes you have to be creative in what that is. But if we start earlier, the easier it's going to be. You build up those behaviors. You kind of wire their brain to understand that reinforcement. The last one is positive punishment. So there are times when negative reinforcement, again, if you don't start until they're older, negative reinforcement may not be enough. So we can also have positive punishment. So we're adding something to the mix that will result in an unpleasant consequence. That never means beating your child. That would be our negative punishment. Spanking or hurting them, because that normally, especially as they get older, that starts building up behaviors that we don't want. So
yeah, and I've always looked at it like, if they know that like they did something wrong, and then I, spank them, or, physically do something to them, then they are looking at it as an example to where, as they grow up, whether that be in other relationships with friends or someone, just anyone, if they're not getting what they want, then it's okay to be physical with them. And I don't, I never really believed in that. I never understood it.
Yeah. But, and I will tell you, I grew up in a household that it was normally the belt, and that was our punishment. That was normally what happened. And again, my temperament was, I'm going to cry and I'm going to retreat to my bedroom and I'm going to feel horrible. And I never want that to happen again.
Yeah.
My brother and father, when my brother started getting older, would get in fistfights because that's how he retaliated from physical punishment.
Right.
So there's never a great outcome with that. But some of it doesn't show up until years later.
Yeah.
So, yeah. An example of the positive punishment, they make a mess, they have to clean it up. They do something, they have to apologize, even if it is embarrassing, even if it's hard for them, because pride is big with older kids. They have to do the uncomfortable part or the gross part, and they have to do whatever that consequence might be. A few other things. Avoid a power struggle. And for some parents, this is so hard because we want the last word. We don't want them. We want to make sure they're learning their lesson. And some kids are just not going to show that they are learning anything when they are being disciplined. So listen to them, try to understand their point of view. However, know that they are going to try to phrase it where they are right and you are wrong, because they're the child, you're the parent. Don't get into an argument with them just to get in an argument. It's end of a conversation. You walk away, if nothing else, to cool down and then come back to it. But also listen to them, because sometimes they may have a question. Maybe something's not making sense for why there's a punishment or why something was wrong. Find common ground. No matter how hot-headed both of you are, there has to be common ground or something you can agree on. Maybe that means walking away first and coming back to it, but there probably is something that you can agree on. Don't force the unneeded. Take the win. Don't push your luck as the adult. because you can only push it so far before it comes back and bites you. So this would be one where, again, my dad was infamous for this, where it's take the win. They get their discipline and we move on. We don't have to be, now say you're sorry. Now do it. I couldn't hear you. Do it again. Come back and do it again. His was always, if we stomped up the stairs, we had to come back down and we had to do it again. And he would make us do it 5 or 6 times until we were no longer stomping. Well, every time he did it, we stomped harder because we're bad. That's just what's going to happen. That doesn't mean we can't talk about it later, but don't push your luck because you're probably not going to get it.
Right.
Don't tear them down. Focus on the problem at hand, not their character, not the behavior. Don't compare them. If you have more than one child, your brother never did that. Well, duh, I'm not my brother. That makes sense why they didn't act this way. And then also try to make them part of the solution. You're more likely to have them follow through with the discipline if they are actively talking about it and helping to figure it out than not. It also, more than one child, if you have, we said what fits for one does not fit for all. However, having consistency among all 3, especially, Chris, I know you said your oldest was a girl and 2 boys. So a lot of times when we have different genders in the household, it becomes, and again, I had this with my brother. I was one that my parents, matter of fact, I only made 1 C, I think, all through school until college, because I would get grounded for C's. My brother, on the other hand, got a tattoo when he got a 2.0.
Right. Yeah.
So making sure that we are being consistent with all children, especially when there's different genders, because again, sometimes what for girls or for boys might seem appropriate in different ways. And that's just society.
Yeah, one of the things that I have a hard time with is my daughter, she's 17. Which to me, I still have a hard time wrapping my brain around, but I grew up very fast, but if I do things differently, I try to do kind of like an age appropriate thing for my 10-year-old. My daughter has an issue with it.
And there's enough of an age gap there. Coming in and out of focus on the screen, it's bothering me. There will probably be some of that because at 17, mindset is mom's being easy on him because he's young, but he knows what he's doing, and she will see some things that you don't see,
right?
Because he is the youngest, so he can probably talk you into some things, and they see that when you don't. So she's gonna harbor some of that, even when she shouldn't, but she's 17, so the feeling she has makes total sense in her head why she's upset, but making that make sense to her sometimes probably feel.
Yeah, trying to make things make sense to a 17-year-old, but my 17-year-old is sometimes it's impossible, it seems. So we try to have a conversation about it, and she doesn't want to let it go. She's very stubborn, and kind of, you're not talking her out of anything. So you're not gonna talk around me, that kind of thing. So you can say whatever you want to say, but I just know it's because of, and it's hard sometimes because, she doesn't realize that the same thing that I'm doing with him are the same things that I did with her when she was at that age.
Right.
And no, it wasn't like that. And yes, it was. And I feel that wanting to say, but it was that way. And that is exactly how we dealt with it. And and I try not to get into that because I know it's pointless. It's not going to get me anywhere saying, no, you're remembering wrong. Right. That's not going to get me anywhere. So I try not to do those things, but she is very, very hard-headed when it comes to that.
17 and the same sex as you are. So moms with teenage daughters, dads with teenage boys. That power struggle in your mind, you're not making it about a power struggle because what you're doing makes sense and the reasons why. But to her, it then becomes a power struggle. And she is
Yes.
going to make it into something that it is not. And you're right. There's no way you can explain that
Yeah,
where
she,
she
even
is
if,
going to accept.
right, yeah, because even if you try to explain it to her, she just doesn't, she doesn't want to hear it. Like, it's, you can say whatever you're gonna say, you're not changing my mind about it. I know what's really going on, like, because I'm, I'm a teenager, I know all type thing.
Oh, yes. Yes. And she's getting very close to being an adult now. So that will get a little worse before it gets better, unfortunately.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Recognize and regulate your own emotions. So this is kind of like self-care, but keep cool. And sometimes, depending on the temperament of your child, that will bother them more than anything else because they are not getting the reaction of you that they want. They want you to lose your cool. But if
Yes.
you can stay composed, a lot of time back to what's happening. Most things we regret are the things we wish we had not said. Those are the things that you go to bed that night and you're like, oh, why did I say that? I should not have said that. What are they thinking about me because I said that? I should have said that differently. I should have thought first. So sometimes it's almost literally biting your tongue until the situation has cooled, and then you can always revisit it. You don't want to bring it back up in a fight, but you can revisit and just try again. You have a 17-year-old, so this gets difficult, but
Yes.
we can try to come back to that conversation and make it a conversation, so it's less of a power struggle because it's not in the moment, it's not as heated, and then we can come back and revisit it. Don't ever be afraid to step away. Messes will wait. You can come back to it, especially because messes are the number one reason we lose our cool about, or at least the quickest. We know it's still going to happen, but if we walk away, there's a much better chance that we can explain what happened or why we did. If we have a blow up, if something happens, whatever that might be, and we kind of explode. Every parent does it. Any that say they don't are lying or
Yes.
blind.
Yep.
But the key is, even if we have that explosive moment, we want to come back and we want to explain as soon as we can after it happened to the child that, you're human too. I should not have acted that way. I'm sorry. Because then, kind of like, spanking leading to other behaviors and relationships later, if we're not explaining and not showing that we're also human, we're also modeling things that hopefully our kids aren't going to take on to future relationships.
Yeah.
So making sure we talk about it is key. Find your outlet. These things tend to make your cup empty so much faster. So what is our outlet? Maybe I just had a huge fight with my 17-year-old. I am taking a long bath tonight. Whatever it might be, find something. Maybe you need a punching bag. Maybe you need, I don't know what it is, but find an outlet. If it's really, really hard for you, never be afraid to ask for help. That might be another parent. That might be a counselor. That might be a teacher. If they have ideas, if your child's doing things at school. As a former teacher, I can tell you, I really wish more parents would have reached out and just said, are you seeing this behavior in my child? Because a lot of times I don't think that parents want to talk about the negatives, because if they're not doing it in school, they don't want negative things being thought about their child by a teacher. But I can guarantee you, if there's a behavior at home, there is probably something also at school, maybe not as bad because they learn how to adapt at school and not show things, but there's probably something else at school that maybe your teacher is doing or their teacher is doing that might work at home. So never be afraid to reach out and ask their teachers or counselors, because they may be dealing with similar things. Also, making a calming exercise with your child. It can help them calm and take a second to deal with things, especially if we start this younger. Teenagers are just going to look at you like, oh, this is dumb. But if we start with them young, you can do like the smell the flowers, blow out the candle. Okay, so just some breathing. Warren, when he was really little, we still think he might be a little bit on the autism spectrum. We haven't had him tested because he does very well. But regulating behaviors is sometimes very difficult for him, especially in transition. So there would come a point when he was like 3, 4 years old where he would take screaming fits, and we would just walk him into his bedroom, set him in his bed where we knew that he was safe, and we would walk out and he would just sit in his bed. Sometimes he'd put himself to sleep, sometimes he'd scream and scream, but sometimes he just needed a moment to regulate himself before, because he didn't know why he was having those moments. So he just needed a minute.
My daughter actually, she says that I mean, she's 17, so she's able to communicate that with me. But whenever she's starting to feel really anxious because she suffers from anxiety and depression, so she deals with those things by separating herself for some time.
Yeah.
And sometimes it might be, Saturday, we've had plans to go do something for the last 3 weeks, and she's been really excited about it. But, the night before or that morning, something happened and she just can't, and it exhausts her. So she would say, I just need the day to separate. And so I try really hard to not make her feel bad about that, even though we want her to be apart. But she sometimes needs that separation where she just needs to sit in her room and cry and let it out, or she needs to blare music. That's her biggest thing right now, is blaring music to kind of get out of her head a little bit. She'll play video games, or she'll, she loves to paint. So she does painting. So we've got all kinds of art supplies for her to use whenever she needs that, which is really good. So I think that's something that we all need sometimes, is just to kind of give ourselves that minute to kind of regulate and figure things out for ourselves, because we don't always necessarily know what we need. So we might need to try a few things before we can calm down.
So I love that she is comfortable enough with you that you guys can communicate that, because that's the biggest hurdle in and of itself, other than figuring out what works, knowing that, okay, mom is going to be okay if I need to take a me moment, because a lot of kids, depending on parenting and how their parents react, that's another one of those, keeping open communication, because if they don't feel they can be open with you, they may need that moment, but they don't feel they can take it.
Yeah, that's actually something that's been fairly new. We've been working on it a lot recently over the past 1.5 years. Last year, her depression kind of really got the best of her, and she attempted suicide. So after that, we really, really worked hard to have better communication. So that way, when she does, and then that's when I started realizing when she was separating herself, she wasn't telling me that that's why. And so because I didn't know, you need to come out of your room. You need to stop hanging out in there, but you need to come out and do something. You were supposed to do this. You need to come out and do this. You're 16 years old, so that's how things would kind of play out. And then she would just shut down even more. And then I just thought, this is the normal teenage things, because that's what I was hearing. And so I thought that. And then after this attempt had been made, and she, got some help, and we really continued with therapy and started really working on it, it was a little bit easier to communicate to where now I better understand that. I hate that we had to get to that point to be able to communicate better, but now at least we know. So it took us a while to get there, but I think it was kind of stubbornness on both parts. I wasn't willing to fully ask, and she never wanted to tell.
Yeah. And that happens all the time. And sometimes it is just that they are stubborn, or you are stubborn, but also a lot of the time, if there's not that communication, then it's hard to know what is the cause or what's going to help it. So that's, I hate that she had to get to that point too, but it sounds like you guys are working well.
Trying to. I mean, there's obviously still road bumps, because she's still a teenager and I'm still mom. So there's still road bumps.
And navigating what is that, typical teenager behavior, and what isn't.
Yeah.
Yep. And you've never had a teenager before, so you don't know. Now, the boys could be completely different. You've had a teenager, but they may be completely different little humans. And then when they get to that point, they may respond completely differently.
Yes, I can already tell the difference between her and then my older son, who is teenager, and I mean, he's just barely, but he's a teenager.
Mhm,
And I can already tell the difference. She will shut down and separate, and he is loud and wants to argue. It's
mhm,
very, very different. Very
yep.
different compared to what, I mean, same mom, same everything. So she just, but it's extremely different dealing with the two of them.
Yes, I saw a meme the other day. I don't think I still have it on my phone, but it was something along the lines of, it's amazing how two different children can grow up in the same house but have two completely different childhoods.
Yes. Mhm.
And that, I mean, that really is, everything is the same, but how they're going to remember and how they're handling things are completely different.
Yeah.
And it really is, it's just the child.
Yeah.
Um,
Because he will debate until the cows come home, he will debate, and my daughter will just say, okay, whatever, and
Yeah.
whatever, I'm not dealing with this. So she shuts down and he will lean in.
yep. That sounds very much like my brother and I,
Yeah.
to be perfectly honest. And that was, we had 6 years between us, so a little bit more, but yeah, it's pretty common.
Yeah.
How much is too much? So we all have breaking points. We know we do as adults. There's nothing different with children. And in fact, sometimes it blows my mind that we think that we can actually expect children to not have breaking points and to need to stay composed and well behaved in all situations. Because if we look at our own behaviors, we know that I mean, we can't do that, let alone them do it. And they're around us or around an adult the majority of the time. So the amount of time they have where they can kind of escape and do their own thing, it's very, very small.
Yeah.
And we often get frustrated with those meltdowns because we don't understand it. But when we can start sensing that they're going to happen, or if we can teach them or help them realize when it's going to happen, kind of like you were saying with your daughter, if her anxiety starts building up, then we might be able to help or to get them to have some sort of escape or have their own self-care, healthy self-care, where they're able to prevent it from getting too much, because you very much know what could happen if it gets to a high enough level, unfortunately.
Right.
Watch for the signs, be sensitive to their needs, always make sure to listen, ask questions if needed, don't assume. Don't push something to happen. One for this, and my family hates this, that we have this as a boundary, but our son, again, who we think is probably a little bit autistic, he does not like physical contact. That is definitely not his love language. He does not like giving hugs. He doesn't like being hugged. My dad is one that with his grandkids, he will be like, come here, just give Pap a high five. And then he'll like pull them in for a hug, which if they have even the smallest bit of anxiety, they hate that. So we don't push him to hug even grandmas. He is getting now where he's building a relationship, a better relationship with them. So he'll start giving hugs, but he still, his go-to is a fist bump. It's like, okay, can you at least give grandma a fist bump? Okay. And we do fist bumps because we know if we push it, we're going to have a meltdown, and we don't want to do that. Plan ahead for things that may cause overstimulation. Again, preparing, knowing that something might happen, and it could be anything. They've been in school all day. We don't know what happened in school that day, but if we know that they're going to something where they have to keep their attention for a long period of time. I know my son's starting piano classes. If I don't take a snack so that he can eat a snack before he goes to piano for 45 minutes is the worst experience in both of our lives for that 45 minutes.
Yeah.
Because he's angry. And I know that. And it'd be very easy to be like, why are you doing this? But I know, he knows.
Yeah.
Make sure we're planning things that are age appropriate. That one is so difficult because some children do well at things that are a little above their level. Some don't do well with things that might be considered age appropriate for them. So make sure that what we're doing, we have expectations of what they're actually going to be able to accomplish in that setting. Model emotional regulation yourself. sometimes that's the most difficult things, because a lot of us don't do well at regulating our own emotions. And kids can sense so much that we think that they don't.
Yes.
Practice self-regulating techniques together. If you have a very anxious day, they have a very anxious day, you can kind of feel that tension. We did for a while when my son was having the big meltdowns, we did, I forget what the channel is called on YouTube. They had like, I remember there was Sonic. They would have like character yoga, and we would turn on video on YouTube, and it would be Sonic teaching us yoga poses. Nothing that was, I mean, we were literally just like sitting and things that he could do at 3 or 4. And it really helped. And it was nice for me because I got to take the deep breaths and we got to lay on the floor and just cool down.
Yeah.
But doing something like that together can really help them regulate and understand that it's okay because they're seeing you do it. Focus on the why, and the why, not the why me. So why is this happening? Not because you're a victim, not because you're targeted, but if this were happening to any other person, it will be happening the same way. So let's look at why this is happening, and then we can work on addressing the behaviors that led to it. There's that be consistent again, and then try to stick to a schedule. Before I was a parent, I would hear people talk about, well, my child's on a schedule and we have to be in bed by 7 o'clock. And to a point, I still think it's a little absurd. But now that I have a child, I understand that if we get really, really off from schedule, they are crazy. Like,
Yes.
kids will eat you alive when they are used to a schedule and they are not following, especially what time they eat, how much sleep they're getting, maybe not so much the actual bedtime, but how much sleep they're getting. That really throws their whole routine off.
Yes.
Okay, biggest things. I know we're going a little over, but starting to wrap up here. Accept that no parent is perfect, and regardless of what happens, what's happening has happened to another parent before, and it's not necessarily a reflection of how good of a parent you are, because no child is the same. 60% of moms feel like they're not doing enough. 45% of dads feel exactly the same way. 60% of parents feel like they let their baby down in the first year of life, where babies probably aren't going to remember any of it, but 60% feel like they left their child or let their child down. Social media has increased these numbers up to 42% in like the recent decade. So we know that social media plays a huge role in this. And for every good picture on social media, there's at least 10 bad ones. So again, like looking on Instagram, what you see is not, if we had like that reverse camera, every time we took a picture, it would say a lot more.
Yeah.
Some ideas: take a social media cleanse. I will, especially Instagram, I will stay away from Instagram weeks at a time before I will go back onto Instagram, because sometimes it just makes me feel bad about myself. So
Yeah.
sometimes I just need to step away, and that's okay. And it could be Facebook, it could be whatever it is. Step away. Also, having another parent friend makes you realize how human you are, because it's really easy to see other parents of other children in the same grade with your child and be like, man, they have everything so together. And then if you hang out, you realize in 10 minutes that, wow, they are not the person I thought they were. They are also losing their crap just like I am as a parent. That is great. Okay. Don't strive for perfect, strive for purpose. You're never going to be perfect. Never. 0% of the time will you ever be perfect. But if you're striving for purpose and having things make sense while you're doing them, communicating with your child, then you are going to get much closer to perfect. Start self-affirmations with your kids at a very young age. You are, I always think of the movie The Help. You are kind. You are.
Yes, I was just thinking that.
Yeah, these are, I mean, that is something you can do. That doesn't mean you have to say, you're the most awesome person in the entire planet and no one is better than you. We want logical self-affirmation.
Right. Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with doing that, or doing it in front of a mirror. Then they get the body positivity with it too. You are kind, you are smart, you are cool, you have friends, you have, focusing on those positives go a long way, and they continue to do that sometimes even until their teenage years. Make imperfections teachable moments. Don't focus on the negatives, focus on our positives. Realize that you are always more perfect to your child than you are in your own self-image. They think more of you. And again, Kristen, you have a teenager, so I am sure there are times where she really makes you feel not perfect.
Yes, she does.
Probably the middle child as well. But also know when they go to bed at night and you've had one of those fights, or they have said some things, just like you have those moments of, why did I say that? I regret saying that. They all have those same moments too. And they feel really bad about them, but they don't know how to understand that in their own minds.
Yeah.
So it really, it's a uphill battle all the way. Journaling. Sometimes this could be good for your children, but also for you as a parent. Journal. How did you feel when this happened? Are we having more of these episodes with my child? Is there something I'm doing? Can I start making connections if I journal it? And then asking for help does not make you weak. If you need to talk to someone, again, whether that's a friend or your spouse, sometimes your spouse is away, or your partner, and they're not having to deal with this. Your children also will argue more with the parent they feel safest around, and that makes it so much harder too. So
Yeah.
there is nothing wrong with even talking to your partner about help and suggestions and talking things through. Don't worry that children never listen to you, because we all know they don't. Worry that they are always watching you. So even though they're not listening, they are picking up on everything that you are doing. So here are some developmental tips for your toolbox. And Kristen, some of these may be out of your zone since your youngest is 10. 17% of children in the US have a developmental disability. And that could be physical, that could be emotionally, cognitively, but 17%, which is a number that kind of blew me away, to be perfectly honest.
I was getting ready to say I did not expect it to be that big.
Yeah, but a lot of times when we think of developmental disability, we think of certain cognitive disabilities. Developmental can be all across the spectrum. 10 to 15% of US preschoolers have identifiable developmental delays. That does not mean that they are addressed, but that means that if someone actually would observe them, they would be able to pick up on these delays. And then 1 to 3% of preschoolers in other countries have identified delays. Again, actually identified. The kind of conversation on this is, in the US, we have a lot more diagnosed or identified developmental delays than a lot of other countries. But when we look at childhoods in our country and different things in parental systems and environments, and there's this whole psychological, social, emotional comparison with ours and other countries, but we do tend to have a lot more identified than other countries. Physical development, I'm going to go through these ones pretty quick. 2 types of development. We have fine motor. Normally, if we think of things we can do with our hands and small movements, gross motor, things involving larger muscle groupings like our torso, our arms, our legs. This was earlier, messes are temporary, and if you plan ahead, oftentimes minimal. So easy activities for fine motor, flipping pages of a book. Know that they're probably going to get ripped in the beginning. But if you plan ahead, you can actually buy like the board books that are thicker, or you can buy, Usborne is a company that their books will have the anti-tear pages. They will still rip, by the way, but it's a lot harder to rip them.
Yeah.
Coloring.
I don't think anything can stop a toddler.
No, they will find something.
They always find a way
if they have to.
Yep.
Yeah. Playing with Play-Doh, cutting with safety scissors, helping in the kitchen, picking a flower, folding washcloths, finger plays where it's like, where is Thumpkin, and different things, Itsy Bitsy Spider, where they have to move their fingers, making pasta necklaces where they have to put the string through the pasta, and then paint and shaving cream art. This is a huge one. I did not know some of the tips in this one. If you put those into one of the big freezer bags and then let them paint, they don't get it on their hands. They get to make creations. There's so many ways you can do that and not have the mess.
Okay.
Gross motor. One of my son's favorite, we would just have the cheap painter's tape from the dollar store. And I think I have a picture here on the next page or a couple of next page or slides. We would just take and run tape tracks through our hallway, through our kitchen, all over the place. And he would 1 foot in front of the other and pretend he was a race car on those tape tracks. And it would peel right up off the floor. It didn't leave anything on the floor. It would take 5 minutes to put down and a minute to pull back up. And we could do it multiple times. And he would keep himself occupied with that hours at a time. He loved doing that. Balloon tennis, the keepy uppy, if you watch the show Bluey, building blanket forts, chalk art obstacle courses. Those are great in the summertime. They can draw them and then they can also do them. So fine motor and gross motor. Scooters, bikes, swimming, jumping in a pile of leaves, making snow angels, going to the park and playing on the playground equipment, taking a scavenger hunt hike. And then we also have bucket transfers. So if we have objects that we can put in the yellow bucket, they have, here's some, they have with the bucket activities where you can do like different colored Easter eggs into different colored buckets. This would be like an example of things you can do with the tape. This one's like a whole city. We used to just take, like I said, and run a line all the way down our hallways. If you do it and kind of put your foot over it as you go, you can make turns with it. And they have all kinds of fun. Pudding, this is something that's pretty user friendly. You take Play-Doh, put your straws on, and then you put your pasta down over the straws or the dial rods or whatever you're using. Shaving cream and paint, if you put down paper or something first, or just do it outside where a mess in the yard doesn't matter, then they can make a mess. Spray them down with a water hose, they're fine. Things to consider: attention spans, 1 minute per age year old they are. So if you have this really elaborate activity with a 3-year-old, they're not going to do it. And then you're going to be upset because you had this whole thing planned, but they're just not going to be able to keep their attention. Also, their abilities. So what you are doing, are they going to be able to do it as an activity? If you get some of the fun things from the Dollar Tree where you can like throw the balls and catch them on the Velcro, 3-year-old's not going to be able to do that. There might be a few that are a bit more advanced developmentally, but they're normally not going to be able to do those things. Prepare for boredom. Have more planned. If you have an activity that should take 20 minutes, plan on it taking 10 and have something else for them to do. Little feet get tired quick. So if they're doing a little walking, plan for breaks. Don't do it for them. They are getting frustrated with something. It's very easy for you as the parent or the adult to say, here, I'll do it for you. We want them to learn. We want them to get the skills. So we scaffold. Maybe if they are trying to get the pasta onto the necklace, we hold the rope for them, but they still have to put the pasta over top. Maybe it's doing 2 things at once. So maybe we can help with one, but they're still doing it. We're not putting the pasta on there for them. And then always plan to take breaks. Cognitive development. Encourage imagination at any age. If they can pretend, it is great for cognitive development. Don't throw boxes away. The best toy your child will ever get is an empty box. Have them help you cook. That could be at any age. Make use of I Spy games. My son's new favorite, and this will tell you about our parenting. We watch The Walking Dead. He does not watch it, by the way, but he knows that mom and dad watch it. And he is my birthday is the day before Halloween. So we take Halloween very seriously in our house.
Yeah.
And he likes the zombie apocalypse. So we now, instead of I Spy when we drive, we play the zombie apocalypse game. And he came up with this all on his own. And we look for rundown buildings or yards that have really high grass. And those are
that's
things that will
very
be in the zombie
neat.
apocalypse.
That's very neat. I'm gonna do
Yeah.
that with mine. We do
Yeah,
do
so-
road trips and we do the ABC game.
Yes.
We do it with all because it's good for all of them.
Yeah.
So we have to start and find when they were younger, we did anything that started. So if they found a tree, what letter does that start with? And you had to go from A all the way to Z. And
That's
now
awesome.
they have to find actual words. And you can't use abbreviations, but you have to find the word that starts with the letter D and then E and all the way through the alphabet. And whoever gets to the end wins. And we'll do that whenever we go on long road trips. We just went to Florida this year and we drove, which ended up being a 16-hour drive.
I was going to say, you have 3 going all the way. That's a long car ride.
And it was a very long car ride for me as an adult. And we made many stops. And during the way we played many, many games of the alphabet game.
Yes. Yes. They also make like the bingo boards now for car rides where they have like the items. And if you find them, you can like stamp them on your bingo boards.
Yeah.
That's a good one. Puzzles, matching games, doing experiments, and that could be anything. What would happen if I do this? I don't know, do it. Let's see what happens. The worst case, we have a mess. Simon Says, singing, playing musical instruments, normally not well, but they will play them. Hide and go seek, story circles, story dice. We had a reading program here at the Center for Excellence in Disabilities, and they had these games called, I think it's called Tall Tales. Not a real popular game, but it is currently my son's favorite. You pull a card and it has like a scene on it, and then there's just a bag full of little tiny silicone figures, and you have to tell a story using the figures that you pull out of the bag. So my husband and I play with him. We get some really crazy stories about meteors coming to Earth, and it gets pretty wild. Fun. But yeah, they love that. Bathtub games and toys. Will it sink or will it float? We do that in the bathtub sometimes. He'll say, Mom, would that sink or float? I don't know. Here, throw it in the bathtub. And it's really that trial and error, letting them be messy, letting them get their hands dirty, anything that they can really do to build cognitively. These story cubes, these are also awesome. If you have something older kids doing things like Pictionary or Taboo, games where they are cognitively having to think at a higher level, anything they can do to be creative. Here's Sink or Float with just a thing of water and just random items, and they have to really think about like, what is density? What is whatever it might be? These little tracks, we have one kind of like this on our refrigerator. It's magnetic and you can make little marble runs. Those are always fun. They have like the You Choose books where you create your own story, and it's like, if you want this to happen, turn to page 6, and they get to create their own stories. All of those are great. Things to consider, again, attention spans, their abilities. They're gonna get bored at some point. Don't do it for them. Plan for breaks. You have to do it with them. Cognitively, for cognitive development, a lot of times these are the things where you have to have that quantity of time. You do normally have to do, because they might be able to do some of it on their own, but they are going to get bored so quickly doing it by themselves, because having someone else to get those ideas with helps. Always prepare for a mess, make everything a learning opportunity. And the biggest one when we're playing games, be ready for sore losers and poor winners. So that can be a learning thing too. Last one, social and emotional development. So emotional, emotion masks, have them draw their happy face, their sad face, and then they can wear them and act out how they'd feel. Keep a feeling chart, calming strategy cards, have a calming corner. Our son uses my closet for some reason. He will go and sit behind the clothes and just take a timeout. And that it's the first time we've ever had a walk-in closet. So I don't know if he just likes the feel in there, but that is his calming place. Do yoga, emotions, charades, bubble breathing. They probably do that when at school when they're little, where you have to have the bubble in your cheeks. You hold your breath, then you blow the bubble.
Yeah.
Then you take the bubble back in. Allow them to have stressful situations. You can't control everything, and keeping them from being in stressful situations is also not going to be a benefit sometimes. Have them keep a journal, have a daily catch up, a quick, okay, 30 seconds, tell me about your day. You can even make it like a competition. Who can say the most about their day in 30 seconds? Also explaining characters' feelings. How does someone feel in a movie or in a book? Social, playing games with more than one person, 2+ players. Encourage a third wheel. They do not do well even up until like 3rd grade with not having one-on-one friendships. So if you can have them involved where there's more than one person, or you and your spouse and them, where they also have to regulate, like, when can I talk? All of that is good for social development. Role play or pretend play, going to the park where they're forced to play with other children, team building or literal building and stacking activities, problem solving, gardening, cooking, things that would be social interactions for adults, and then group activities of any sort. It does not have to be playing sports. In fact, for some children, sports may not be the best option. So it really could be anything, but we want that social and emotional development. Most of these are, again, going to be similar. The age appropriateness, parallel versus cooperative play, until they are about 4 years old. Some may start a little earlier, but that cooperative play where they're actually playing with someone doesn't happen naturally. Parallel play is where they can play right alongside each other. They play with the same toys, but they are not really interacting unless someone steals their toy from them. So that typically happens until about age 4. Don't give in too quickly. They're going to get stressed out. It is going to be a lot, but letting them have a little bit of time to try to work through that. If it's obvious they're not, then we can remove them, but we don't want to give in too quickly. Be ready for sore losers. Praise the process, not the outcome. And everyone may not be a winner, but everyone wins at something. That's kind of saying there are different ideas about, like, everyone getting a participation trophy. So, okay, you didn't win, but how awesome were you when you did this? So
Right.
understanding that you don't always win, but that's, again, focusing on those positives. So we're not saying, no, you won, because that's not a good mindset to have either. Knowing that they didn't win, but we still want to focus on those positives. And the number one thing you can do is read. Read with your kids, and that could be, Kristen, yours are getting older, so them reading on their own. You have a 10-year-old, maybe it's still cool to read some things with him.
We read Pokemon books.
Where it's not.
Yeah, we read Pokemon books or
Awesome.
Game instruction manuals.
I am already starting to get there with my 6-year-old, and I can't tell you how often I want to roll my eyes, but I know they pick up on that. So
Yeah.
We'll get there. We'll get there. Reading can reduce stress by 68%. Children, some statistics, children with at least 20 books at home average 3 more years of completion in school. Reading increases the bond between children and their parents exponentially. I don't even have a statistic for that, but we know that it increases that bond. Children 0 to 14 who read and are talked to regularly test much higher on IQ tests. Children who regularly read to in the 5 years leading up to kindergarten, so about age 5, are exposed to 1.4 million more words than children who aren't read to in the first 5 years up until kindergarten. Reading increases attention spans because they start building it up as they sit and listen to books. Topics in books can help with social emotional maturity, especially if you select books that deal with those topics. By age 3, 85% of the brain's core is developed. So the earlier you can start, the better those behaviors start becoming routine. 37% of children arrive at kindergarten without the skills necessary for lifetime learning because they haven't had it at home. There's almost a 90% probability that a child will remain a poor reader at the end of 4th grade if the child is a poor reader at the end of 1st grade. So when they are doing their sight words, where they are starting to learn letter sounds, kindergarten and 1st grade, it is really important. That even goes to doing homework with them and showing that there's a love for learning. because if they are poor at the end of first grade, odds are by the time they're getting ready to go to middle school, they're still going to be a poor reader and a slightly poorer learner. 78% of juvenile crime is committed by high school dropouts. And children's academic success at ages 9 and 10 can be attributed to the amount of talk they hear from the first 3 years of life. And last one, remember, no parent is perfect, no kid is the same, and nothing works 100% of the time. And just to show you these temperaments, because you could have a textbook in front of you on parenting, and it doesn't matter because every child's temperament is going to be different. Same parents, you could have twins, identical twins, and their temperaments are going to be different. They're going to have different activity levels. They're going to approach things or withdraw from things differently. They're going to adapt differently. Their intensity is different. Their mood's different. Their attention spans, how easy they're distracted, and their sensory threshold are all going to be different regardless of the child, which is why discipline doesn't work with every kid and is why interests are never the same between every child. Next month is our last session, and I know I went way over. So Kristen, thank you so much for hanging in there with me today.
Well, thank you for sharing with me,
yeah,
even though I was your
absolutely.
only person.
No, thank you so much. At least having one that was willing to talk, I think that made this much better. The last session, next session, is selling soft skills or employability skills. So we're going to look at hard versus soft skills or employability skills. We're going to look at building a resume with some resources. We have some great resources here with our Career Center at WVU with templates and things that are already built for you to put your information into. We're going to talk about answering interview questions, protected information, how to prepare for an interview, how to sell yourself, and ways to build your soft skill threshold. That one will also be on Tuesday instead of Wednesday. The original date was going to be for the 16th, but it will be on the 15th because I have to help with an open house on the 16th. So it will instead be the 15th from 2 to 3. Ms. Kristen, do you have any questions, my dear?
I did have a question because earlier
Yes.
when you were talking about the parenting questionnaire,
Mm-hmm.
so I did do that.